everybody, this is the Wikstrand. So when Traffic was released, it was seen as the big comeback for one Steven Soderbergh, who for the past years had been relocated to Hollywood's forgotten backyard. But he was back, and this movie was hailed as an absolute masterpiece. And when 2000 became 2001 and Oscar season rolled around, we basically had a triple threat match for who was going to walk out with the most statues from that year's Academy Awards. We basically had Gladiator, we had Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and we had Traffic. And because sharing is caring, they walked away with equally prestigious statues each. Traffic bagged, I think, Best Director, which I still think should have gone to the best of these movies, Gladiator. My opinion on these three movies are essentially the same today as they were back when they were released. Gladiator was the best, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was the second, and Traffic was the third movie. I didn't think it was quite as good as the other two, and I was a little bit annoyed at how much good press it got and how good reviews they got and stuff like that, because this movie was seen as this amazing movie that everybody should see, and I partially agree with them, because when I rewatched this movie for the purpose of this review, I found out that this movie was a lot better than I remembered it to be. But one thing always stuck out to me when it came to Traffic, and that was around the time when it was released, Mad Magazine made a parody of Traffic. It wasn't unusual for Mad Magazine at this point to make fun of big blockbusters as Tomb Raider or Star Wars or stuff like that, and usually doing that with a tongue-in-cheek fun humor that I really appreciated. But trying to do a parody of Traffic, I always thought was in kind of poor taste. It takes a lot of effort to make me think that a joke is in poor taste or something like that, but I just found that thing to be very unfunny, because this is a very depressing movie. This is a very harsh movie. This is a movie that is really, really difficult to make, fun of, because how are you going to do it? Anyway, we're getting sidetracked. Let's find out how depressing this is. This is 2.5 hours of drug running and fighting drug cartels. This is Traffic. Traffic has essentially 4 storylines going on at the same time. We have 2 honest police officers in Tijuana, one of them played by Benicio del Toro, who is trying to stop the drug smuggling, but they run into a powerful military guy called General Salazar, and they start helping him because he is going to crush the Tijuana cartel. Will this be successful, or are our police officers just poking the bear and is slipping into something that is even more dangerous than arresting drug dealers and stuff like that? On the other side of the border, we have a newly appointed quote-unquote drug czar played by Michael Douglas, who is going to take on the war of drugs, and he is going to win. He's not going to play the classical political game. He wants to have results done, and he starts this position with a lot of enthusiasm, but he doesn't realize that his daughter is slipping further and further down into a maelstrom of drug use, and his marriage is on quite rocky grounds. Speaking of marriages that are on rocky ground, Catherine Zeta-Jones, her husband is arrested. She's pregnant and just this regular upper class housewife who has fundraisers and lunches with her friends and stuff like that, but now finding out that her husband might be a importer of drugs, and furthermore owes the cartel a lot of money, and people from the cartel is pressuring her and threatening her family and stuff like that. Will Dennis Quaid be able to get him off the hook? We shall see, because Luis Guzman and Don Cheadle, 2 DEA officers, have arrested a guy who is going to snitch on Catherine Zeta-Jones' husband. And they try to protect him so he can make court, because as we all know, snitches get stitches. That is essentially what Traffic is about. Now, let's get into the first thing that I really, really love about this movie. The cast of this movie. Holy shit, what a fucking cast they have. It is a fucking excellent cast. Also should be mentioned that we also have Topher Grace in a small role. We also have these very, very small cameos, almost you could say, with, you know, Salma Hayek showing up and being a goddess. She's this kind of bitchy cartel wife. I think she could have, you know, been used a lot more. We also have Viola Davis, who shows up as a social worker in a blink and you'll almost miss it cameo. I think she could have been, you know, bigger part of this movie, but I don't know. The thing is that they all have fantastic characters with layers upon layers. This is not, you know, good guys versus bad guys. This is different shades of grey, or, you know, the longer the movie progresses, different shades of black, you could say. And I think that the characters are so compelling, and I think they have such interesting arcs. And another thing that this movie does that is really, really good is the fact that you don't quite know where things are going, and it's very unpredictable, and the movie feels big, the scope is big, and the pacing is really good. When it comes to the technical aspects of this movie was hailed as being, you know, this really smart and clever thing they did, because the movie looks differently depending on sort of where you are or what is happening, because usually for about, I don't know, 70% of the movie it is filled with regular colors, but we do have these sequences when we are in Mexico, and then everything is in sepia tones and stuff like that. It looks very warm and it looks very dusty and stuff like that. And then we have these cobalt blue sequences. I first thought that that was going to be just when we were in DC, to, you know, DC cold, Mexico warm, but then we had different sequences that was also cobalt blue, that was, you know, sitting in Ohio and stuff like that. And I always thought, what was the blue thing was supposed to symbolize? I don't know. I always thought that was a little gimmicky and they didn't need to do that. Did Steven Soderbergh think that we weren't going to realize that we are in Mexico unless he put this sepia thing on? It's not bothering me that much, but I just wanted to bring it up because I didn't thought it was necessary. One thing I thought was very clever with these 4 independent storylines was the fact that the longer the movie went, the more entwined they actually were with each other. And I always, you know, go, ooh, whenever somebody from one storyline appears in another, you know, storyline, and they, you know, passing each other in the streets and stuff like that. I like that a lot. But we do have to talk about a couple of things that I think was not as good as the other. And that thing is called the Michael Douglas storyline. Because his thing with, you know, his daughter who is slipping further and further into, you know, drug addiction and stuff like that was compelling, but it didn't feel like it belonged in this movie. He felt he was sort of disconnected from the rest of the movie. And I didn't think that was the strongest part. I always thought whenever, you know, Michael Douglas would show up and, you know, talk to the border people and stuff like that, and going to parties and talk to, you know, other politicians and stuff like that, I always thought, can't we go back to Catherine Zeta-Jones and, you know, her trying to handle, you know, the trial and, you know, the cartel things and stuff like that. And can we go back to, you know, General Salazar and what he's doing and stuff like that? Why do we have to spend this much time with Michael Douglas? I didn't care as much for his part of the movie as I did for the other ones. That was a little bit of a shame. And I also felt that the filmmakers felt that they had to put that thing into this movie to, you know, show what happens, you know, when people use drugs and all that stuff. But we kind of know that, and it was a little bit on the nose, I thought. It was compelling, but I didn't think it was that strong. And the other thing I didn't like about this movie was the end. Now, my guess is that the ending of this movie was done sort of by design. It's supposed to end like that. You're supposed to have that feeling when you're leaving the movie as you have, but I couldn't help but feeling a little bit unfulfilled at the end of this movie, and it put a little bit of a damper on the whole thing. But do I think this movie is good? It is a very, very good movie. Do I think that it is as good as, let's say, Sicario? It certainly is not, but it is better as, for instance, a movie like The Counselor or something like that, that, you know, deals in similar things. But this is a movie I really, really recommend people to see. It's a really good, really big movie with lots of characters that you do care what happens to them, and lots of storylines that you don't quite know where they're going. And There are some moments in this movie that is absolutely fantastic, and there arguably are some things in these movies that could have been done better, but it is still a very compelling viewing, and it is very depressing and it is very bleak, but I really like it. I also like the fact that the message that they, send in this movie is a little ham-fisted, but it doesn't quite hit you over the head with it all the time. I love the fact that these sequences, at the border almost feels a bit documentary when, talking about that, oh, we only capture about, 30 to 40% of everything that comes through, and politicians are talking about what are we going to do with the rehab, and how do we get people not to get hooked on drugs and stuff like that. And Topher Grace have a pretty nice conversation actually with Michael Douglas about inner city people who the only career option they have is running drugs and stuff like that. And those sequences could have been really hokey and very much don't do this, do that, but they did it in such a smart fashion that I didn't mind that much. It should also be mentioned that Traffic is based on, or at least inspired by, a TV show from the 1980s, I think it was, and maybe that is why the movie ended the way it did. Did I think that this movie should have had 2 or 3 sequels, or do I think this movie should have been a 10-part miniseries? Maybe, but what we got was pretty damn good. The first time I saw Traffic, I thought it was moderately good. I think I gave it a 58 rating back then, but now that I have rewatched it and realized that it was better than I remembered it to be, I am proud to give this movie 73 points. It's a really good movie, some excellent actors putting on some very good performance. The way they told this story was really clever and really inventive, but I do think that sometimes things got a little complicated, and maybe I, accidentally looked away for a few seconds because I didn't realize why a certain thing was happening, and then sort of, why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? But maybe that's on me, or maybe they just was too vague of why X were doing Z. Probably it could have been more appropriate to review The Mist a day like this, but I'll see you next time for, well, so-and-so reviewing, well, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.